So I want to first thank everyone for joining us today, and certainly thank our presenter, Ed Cabellon. He's going to talk to us today about data visualization in our assessment work. He's the assistant to the Vice President of Student Affairs at Bridgewater State University. And Ed, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, thanks, Margot. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be with you and grateful for the invitation to share some thoughts on data visualization. Just a quick aside in terms of my background in history and student affairs. I've been in the field now for almost 20 years, and in that time I've held many roles in student affairs at about 4 different institutions, both private and public, and currently sitting in a senior leadership role at Bridgewater on our division leadership team. And so, over the past probably year and a half now, I've taken what has been a passion of mine, which has been technology, which some of you may know me for already, and started thinking about how can we start applying digital technology in the things that we have access to, the things that we may not realize we can use for data visualization, and start using that to tell our stories a little better. I think there's a lot of mindsets out there around data visualization and how we represent data to our constituents. But I think we have to, in student affairs now, given the changing nature of higher education, the challenges we all have with whether it be enrollment or fiscal model or financial models, and sort of proving the worth of the work that we do in student affairs through data to help make data-driven decisions. Data visualization, I believe, is going to become integral into the work that we do. And I know that many of our mindsets out there around this involve the fact that it's just one more thing we're adding to our plate. But I hope that today, some of the things that we've done here at Bridgewater can inspire you in your areas to start thinking about how to build infrastructure, how to sell your vice president or assistant vice president or dean, or if you're already a dean or in senior leadership, how to sell your staff as well as your executive staff on the importance of this topic. So I appreciate you taking time with me today. I hope this will be a conversation. And so really the 3 things we're going to talk about, and this is a talk, an abbreviated version of a talk I gave this summer at Ohio State University at their assessment conference. So for those of you who may have been there, I'm sorry to disappoint, but it's going to reiterate some of the things I've already said. But I was invited to that assessment conference to really start expanding people's mindset on this topic. And conversations I had with folks there were promising and exciting, and I've had many follow-up with folks. So I hope today allows for that same conversation. So we're going to talk about the why. I think that's important. We're going to talk about 5 overall uses for data visualization and 2 starting points to get you going. And then I hope that throughout the conversations, or throughout the presentation today, and then the subsequent questions and conversation, that I can help get to the root of some of your concerns and some of the challenges you may be having in your campus. And certainly, please, today is not just the one presentation and done. If folks want to reach out and connect with me on these topics further, please feel free to do so. I'm always happy to share resources and advice as best as I can. So let's get started. So I don't know if there's a hashtag for today, and someone who's really into Twitter and social networks, if you want to tweet out today some things you're learning, feel free. I'm happy to share that information with folks, or if you want to tweet, I guess we'll use hashtag SAAL if folks want to do that, or if another one comes up, let me know. But please tag me in the post too, so that I can see those tweets after. All right. So I want to start just by sharing that I just think that the human brain is, is an amazing organ in our body. It has the ability to do so much, and I think we all know this, but I sort of want to give you a 30,000-foot level of the topic today, and that when you stop and think about what we do on a daily basis and the capacity that we each have to look at things differently and to see things differently and how our brain processes it is an important thing to consider. We naturally see shapes and patterns better than anything else that we look at on a daily basis. Consider that the connection between the speed at which the connection between the eye and the brain are. It's very, very, very fast. The brain receives 8.96 megabits of data from the eye every second. So as you're listening to me and as you see these slides, your brain is moving faster than you can really comprehend what you're seeing because it's the speed at which it's processing. It is something that I think as the digital age has unfolded, we have become more accustomed to and almost expected that the things we see, whether it's in our computers, on our handheld devices, wherever, that the visualization of those things are so much more important than what the words say because our minds automatically associate with the photos or the videos that we're seeing. When we're reading content, the average person can only comprehend 120 words per minute reading. Yet, that's only equivalent to 81.6 bits of data per second. So then if we look at the speed at which and how we comprehend it visually, there's no way to compare the two, and that our visual comprehension speed is much faster, exponentially faster than how we read. Yet when we share data with our colleagues, the way we typically will represent it is through a report, how we write those points, those bullet points, or executive summaries. And while, yes, we do have other ways of sharing data points, I think it's important to consider visually how we do that. We are not wired to read fast, folks. We are wired to visualize fast. And in working in higher education, the challenges of capturing folks' attention today is much harder than it used to be given the state of the digital age that we're in. And while data visualizations are an awesome tool, it's certainly something to consider adding to the processes we already have in our campus to present important data sets that we collect as part of our assessment work. Here's just 5 fundamental ways that you can use data visualization to increase engagement. Because I think at the end of the day, the work we do to collect the data is important. But because of data-driven decision-making, it's even more important to consider how we market and share that data to a variety of constituents, not just the people that perhaps you and I would be interacting with on a daily basis, but students, alumni, board of trustees members, the executive cabinet. We have to consider how each of those audiences would receive this data visually. So currently, we do it right now as an analyzation tool. When you think about data sets and representing data, this is how we typically look at it. We look at bar charts, line graphs, heat maps, bullet graphs, things that an Excel spreadsheet could automatically could build, or if we're using data tools, data collection tools like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, they may be able to generate some of these tools for you so that it looks like you're presenting the data in a comprehensive way. You know, when I look at data plots and how they look, this is how we see things in terms of enrollment numbers, in terms of financial numbers. We're used to seeing data in this way. To some, this is a very basic or elementary way of presenting data. To others, it's advanced. That's part of our challenge, that we don't have a standard by which I think the student affairs field anyway presents data across multiple audiences. You know, when I look at social media data, it's also presented very similarly, yet with a few twists and turns. But when I look at these tools and dashboards, I think the point of it is to look at trends, anomalies, correlations, and patterns, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to understand. That's how we're trying to use data to understand these things and overall make decisions. So when you look at a well-designed dashboard, consider what you use on your campus already. When you present data or when you look at data, are you already using dashboards and to what extent, and how is it manifesting itself to the people that you're presenting the data to? The second thing I want to talk about is discovery, and I think when you look at the discovery of data, oftentimes many folks reading our data sets may not even realize what they're looking for. They're just interested in the topic or the timing of that data collection or the audience that you're collecting it about, but this is where you could discover other pieces of information that you didn't even realize you wanted to know about. And so when you don't know exactly what you're looking for, it's important to have interactive data visualizations that allow you to mine data and discover information. So when we present data visualization, it should lead the person scanning that information to ask more questions about it. The example you may see in the graphic behind you is Boston University. If you go to Boston University's annual report, you can Google search it. It is probably one of the best data dashboard visualizations that I've seen out there in terms of how they present data that they've collected over the course of the year. It is a very contemporary look at how engaging and interactive data can be if that extra step is taken to figure out how to best represent it. And so if you have a chance, take a look at it. I think it's well worth your time investing. And of course, you know, Boston University, it took them a while to get to this point, and they started in 2013 doing this. The subsequent 2014 and 2015 reports are outstanding, and I recommend you take a look at it, like I said. The third way to do this is supporting current stories that your division, your department, your institution might be trying to tell out there. And so the right data visualization can help you emphasize key points and provide context to emphasize those key points. And so consider for a moment the way that we teach one another, whether it be through PowerPoint presentations like this. How often are we using the data to create great visualizations and to up the sophistication of how we present in trainings, either in person or online? Are we still doing it through bullet points? Are we still doing it through words that are read to you? Certainly, you could argue that in order to engage the student population that we work with, that training and teaching in those ways is antiquated and doesn't serve our students in the best way possible. And so we need to consider how to better use visualizations or graphics such as this to make stories more memorable and that will stick with you. This is an example of a simple graph that a colleague of mine, Paul Gordon Brown, which some of you may know, used in one of his presentations to talk about data around social media use. And so you can still see the integration of bar graphs that I think we're used to seeing, but with the right graphic and the right formatting in terms of a graphic behind it, the color scheme, and using the white text on that dark background. Certainly the folks who are reading this have more of a sense of what the story you're trying to tell. And so certainly, again, something to consider when we're looking at presenting data to tell a story. The fourth way to use data visualizations is really to tell a story by itself. And that really is through infographics, and something that our division has now adopted as a standard operating procedure when presenting data to the division as well as our students, because our students really are the ones who gain a lot of perspective from the things that we're doing. When I went to Ohio State, I sent a survey out to folks ahead of time, and I asked them various questions about their own technology use. And I presented it initially in this way, where I showed them the graphs and the plots and sort of how many people answered the questions and how the answers played out. And then I showed them an infographic of the same data. And this is the top half of it. And you can see right away, as soon as you see it, your eyes are drawn to, okay, yeah, there's a lot of text on here, but the graphics are what you see first and the way that the text is shown. It's not just Times New Roman or some of you Comic Sans fans out there. Topography makes a huge difference in how folks read your data. And so even something as simple as changing the font by which you present your data in can make a huge difference in how people read the data. And so when you look at this, and then the bottom section as well, this for, I would say, the majority of the folks in the room when I presented it said they would rather see the data in this format than in the traditional bars and graphs alone. And perhaps this isn't a replacement. Perhaps this is an augmentation for some of you, but again, something to consider. If you're spending all this time collecting the data, we should try and figure out a better way to present it. Here are just some examples of some of the student learning outcomes data that we've presented to both faculty, staff, and administrators throughout the division. and beyond. These are available on our website if you're interested in seeing more infographics that we've done over the past few years, and that's the site where we'll continue to share more examples. But certainly as you look through these aren't just divisional learning outcomes, but we also do programmatic infographics. So with each program that we do, when data is collected at the point of the program, at the assessment level for programs, we'll convert those into a story that is told through an infographic. And again, most folks enjoy reading this, whether it's in print format or digitally, because it truly is a bit more engaging. Here's some more examples of some infographics that we've done in the past. And I'll get to how we did this in a second, because I know that some folks are probably wondering, well, how did you do this? And so I'll get to that in a second. And finally, the fifth way I see using data visualization in student affairs is really to teach. And so consider for a moment that when our brains perform, when you consider how our brain performs better when we can hear and see information, the data behind it is actually pretty staggering. Because our brains perform more efficiently and more information is retained when we actually use visuals versus just speaking. So the best example I can give you to prove this point is from one of my favorite movies of all time, Star Wars. And some of you may know this from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Hope the Star Wars fans out there are rejoicing right now as I use this as a little example. But can you imagine, and for those of you who didn't watch Star Wars, a quick background, this is a scene in the movie where the rebellion is about to go against the evil empire and to attack what was called the Death Star, which is a big starship. And the folks who are presenting to the freedom fighters, the rebellion, were sharing a graphic of how you were able to take down the Death Star, and you had to shoot a proton torpedo through this 2-meter hole. Well, can you imagine if instead the general here decided to use PowerPoint instead and say, all right, folks, let me read this to you right now. The battle shield is heavily shielded, and read every bullet point instead of what they saw and was able to view. And actually, when I presented this at Ohio State, I had to actually show the clip so you could see the full clip, which is exciting. But the difference between the two are staggering in terms of how they were able to perceive that information and move forward with it. And then of course, may the force be with you, right? And so this is from a book. This is from a book called Presentation Zen. If you're curious, and I first saw my colleague Tony Duty present it, and I thought it was a great idea. So I wanted to share that with you to make that point today. So I know many of you are thinking, how do I do this? I get it. You may be short-staffed. You might be the only person on your team doing assessment. You might have so many other things on your plate that this is probably the last thing you're thinking about. So we felt the same way at Bridgewater. We knew this was important. We recognized the value. And so we started thinking, how do we create an infrastructure to make this work? Well, here at Bridgewater, we have a digital side to our student affairs division called BSU Life. And as part of BSU Life, we created an integrated communication model that supports our divisions. This is a division resource. We recognize that offices throughout the Division of Student Affairs are doing communication to students, faculty, and staff pretty well, but not all of them are doing it as well as possible. So we created an integrated communication model that allowed for students to utilize graphic design students, communication studies students, as well as marketing students to help us create this content so that it could be publicly shared. So not only did we create an infrastructure with student employees, but we gave those student employees a co-curricular experience that helped them build their portfolios and resumes, which guess what? That was something that was missing at the institution. I mean, some students would go out for an internship and do that, but now they're doing with us and helping us fulfill what our needs are. And so this is the infographic that describes our process by which people can fill out a form and get things filled out. So what folks in the division who do assessment would do, they would take their data sets and highlight the most important pieces of data they felt they wanted to create an infographic from, or create slides for presentations from, and they would send it to our team and we would turn it around for them. And this was no cost to the division or the department. We advocated for some student employment dollars, and we had work study money available as well. So we just repurposed some of the positions in our division to help fulfill this mission. And so this is an example of the form that folks would fill out. And then we could use social networks to help tell our story. And so even though folks are pretty, the ubiquitous use of social networks is prevalent today in higher ed and student affairs, what was missing was the associated graphics. I would see a lot of our colleagues post things on social media, but in text form only. And we know from the research and data that that is not enough anymore. We have to provide visuals, sometimes even short videos, in order to capture people's attention. And so before we can use social networks, you have to be able to create the graphical representation of that data before you can really get people's attention on social networks. This manifested itself through our YouTube channel, as well as throughout our division that now looks at this more holistically. And so each of the divisions may use us, may not, but in terms of getting started for our division members and folks throughout student affairs that I've worked with, Canva is a great starting point as a free resource for you to create graphics that, as long as you know how to use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, you can use Canva. And Canva.com is probably the best graphics program that's free. You can pay for a bit more access to their custom themes and whatnot if you want to expand that. But in order to get data visualized in a really great way, you have to figure out a software program that will help you. And for us, it was starting out with Canva until we started utilizing graphic design students who were already using programs like Adobe InDesign, Photoshop, and the like. And so it took us a while. It took us about a year to get this really off and running. But we learned a lot through the process because we knew that the data that we were collecting were great stories to tell. We knew that people weren't going to read the reports per se. And so how do we capture their imagination? We utilize data visualization. Two other books I would say that are great resources for you, in particular about presenting the data to constituents, is Slideology, which you can't see because of the way that the slide is presenting right now. But the red cover is Slideology, and the other book is Presentation Zen. Both are fantastic resources for how to build a great slide and how to build a great data visualization. So between Canva and these two books, you know, investing some time into reading and looking at some of the ways to do that within your own division are important. Other things we've done on campus is we've partnered with, if you have an institutional communication or marketing office on campus, finding out if you can tap into some of their resources and their help to get some things created. And again, the partnerships with academic departments, particularly in the graphics area or art department, communication studies, or the marketing or business department are invaluable. So, you know, reaching out to some folks in those areas could be a way to also start maybe securing internships like we have here. So we've moved beyond student employment at Bridgewater and also been able to create internship opportunities for students who want a more integrated marketing experience, which is what we've created. I'm going to stop here. I just data dumped a lot on you, so I want to be able to answer questions at this point on where you're at. So I'm going to pause here. Okay, so Jody's question is about quantitative, so visualizing qualitative data. I think for us as we experiment, we haven't done a lot of qualitative data visualization yet, Jody, but in my mind, the best way to visualize qualitative data would be through the use of short videos. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can view some of our videos where we've shared data. We did an It's On Us campaign to highlight the importance of sexual assault violence prevention on campus. and we use qualitative stories and data in that video. So certainly you can check that out. It is harder because to tell a story and write it out defeats the purpose of the visualization. But certainly I think through video you can get creative. So in my recommendation for video production would be less than 90 seconds for video if you can do that. So Jenna's question is, who guides, supervises students? I do. Currently in my role on division leadership, my portfolio includes marketing, communication, our division's budget, and technology. And so that's a progressive student affairs business administrator leadership role that I think doesn't really exist much outside of Bridgewater, to be frank. But what I did was I created a student management team that reports to me directly, who oversees the students. So in a former life, I was director of the student union in a campus center. And this is where a lot of this stuff started for me in the student union, where we would help market events for our programming board and for the Student Activities Council and SGA. So we developed a nice rapport with those folks, and it just built from there. And so I think in terms of the infrastructure, they do report to me because a lot of times, I'm going to want to make sure I'm keeping tabs on the social networking posts. And we have a social media handbook for the division, which helps us throw information out, whatever it is, whether it's about our data or other stories that are happening in the division. So I oversee all of our internal communications to students, which as a side, I think is a lacking infrastructure piece for those of us in student affairs who that might be decentralized, where it's left to each department to figure that out, to how to get the message out to students. I think to be more sophisticated and contemporary and really keep our students in mind, moving to a divisional infrastructure where you can support offices who need it and augment those who are already doing it well, I think is the way to go. It certainly has worked for us here. And we certainly have dotted line relationships to our friends in IT as well as our institutional communications team. And because our institution's communications team is really focused on the external branding and communication and messaging, more PR, more marketing, and really much less about internal communication. And so we fill that gap in student affairs by the work we've done, and we still have a ways to go. It's not perfect, but certainly we are finding out new ways to reach our students. So thank you. Hope that answers your question, Jenna. Next question. Or Brandy has a comment about Adobe Voice. Thank you very much. I didn't know about Adobe Voice. I'm going to add that to my repertoire now. Thank you. Jeremy, I like chart junk. I think if I'm reading it right, Jeremy, it's trying to make sure that the data. Sorry, I'm reading and processing at the same time here. Text is still needed. The challenge is getting people to read the text. So to you and I think to the folks listening in right now, there are absolutely times where the text is important. But again, you have to think about what's the purpose that you're sending this data visualization out, and who's the audience. If the audience are students, if the audience are parents, if the audience are alumni, they may not care as much as the background. They just want to know, just give me the facts. If you're presenting to a more academically minded audience that might want to know more information, so providing the link in the infographic at the bottom to the data set or the big report that you may have already written, I would say could fulfill some of the need to nuance some of the data out a little bit more, because I think those of us who would look at these would be a little more critical as to, all right, you say 67%, but 67% of what? And you can't do that in an infographic. It's very difficult to. What you're doing is you're highlighting main points to get people's attention and to start conversation. Moving forward, it may require you to actually show that data, which you still should as part of your operating procedure, but I think you have to consider the audience. That's really the first step. So I hope I responded well to that, Jeremy. If not, we can keep chatting about that. Tim, your question about gold standards of data visualization. I haven't seen a lot. I know that the folks at Boston University do a really good job. The folks at Northwestern University do a really good job, that Student Affairs Division. And I know the University of Arizona does a really good job. But when you look at those three schools, including Bridgewater, the common thread and common ground between all of them is that there's a divisional infrastructure that supports it. So I don't think it's sustainable to do it within a department alone. It needs leadership at your division leadership level to have a sustainable approach and a strategy. If it's simply in one department, it's hard for me to see it being sustainable as a divisional resource, as a divisional mindset, and that the university can point to and go, wow, Student Affairs is doing a great job with that. And so those three schools, Boston University, Northwestern, and University of Arizona are three that come to mind. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. Being a doctoral candidate and writing my dissertation right now, it's been hard to follow up on some of these other curious pieces like this question for me to look at, but rest assured it's on my to-do list to look at. So thank you for the question. Tim, another great question about accessibility. So one of the things we're working with our IT folks on is how do you create a JPEG or a PDF that's accessible for folks to be able to view via screen reader. We have not done a good job with that, I'm going to be honest, but it is on our radar. We're trying to figure that out. Outside of alt tags and telling a screen reader what a picture is, or making sure that, because I know that some folks sometimes use programs like Izu for magazines, and that's, if it's flash-based, it's very difficult to be accessible via screen reader, and that's really what I'm thinking about. We already do a good job with our YouTube videos to caption them to make sure that's standard so that that's available on a YouTube video. But even then, we still are learning in that respect. So those are just some ideas. I hope that answers some of your questions. So, okay, other questions? Venage. All right. Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate that tip as well. Other questions? Okay. Well, I will leave my contact information unless there's other things that I'm missing. Margot, are you still on?
I am still on, and we can certainly share your contact information and the recording from today with folks, and if there are questions, we can follow up with those.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I hope this has illuminated for you some of the things that we've been working on here at Bridgewater in terms of its importance for the field. I'll be at NASPA NACPA in the spring following up with some sharing data from the data we've collected about this effort. So as we look at the things that we've done with data visualization, seeing the data behind it and the impact it's had, it's going to be fun to present on, so I can't wait to do that. But please make sure that if you have any other questions, you reach out. I appreciate the opportunity and hope this was helpful and useful for your time today. So I wish you all the best in this academic year, and I hope to meet some of you in a future in-person opportunity. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ed, and I think it is a topic that we're all thinking about and seeing things and wanting to know more about how to do it, and you've identified some great resources for us, and I imagine lots of people will have some interest in finding you at NASPA or seeing some other sessions like this down the line. So thanks so much for your time, everyone, and look for the recording if you want to see copies of the slides today that Ed put together for us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.